sitting with my grandkids, so I'm gonna
Alrighty.
and hang out at their house, and um, so
Okay.
that
Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks after
in
this
two
morning
weeks.
then. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, so we are now sitting with my grandkids. So I'm doing it again. See, it's because it's because for some reason YouTube just comes up and starts talking right in the middle of my sentence. Sounds like I'm repeating myself. Anyway, so good morning, everybody. We are here reading Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick. And uh, again, we've been reading this for some time, and every week I'm blown away more and more by just seeing things that I never I wouldn't have seen, right? Because I wouldn't have had any kind of history to look back on. But since having studied the course for so long and hearing all these stories and having all these concepts going on in my mind, now going back and reading this book, it just has completely shifted a lot of my thinking in a really important way, I think. I that's why I appreciate this so much, Bruce. It's just fun to be here with you and
Oh, very much. And it's such a wonderful transformation of what started out for both of us as a, very interesting biography about the lady who scribed the course. And now it's like, well, the added depth and dimension of seeing our own mind and everyone's split mind, really, um, represented by Helen Schuckman's ambivalence to the course. And on one level, we all know what the course says inside and out, backwards and forwards, because it really is our real identity. And in another way, the other part of our mind, um, we've dissociated almost completely from that, but the course is leading us gently but inexorably back to the peace that we never left, only dreamt that we did. And that's Helen's story epitomizes that as well. So
yeah, yeah. Just,
enormous resistance and ambivalence we all have is what we're all learning to undo. And Helen just gave us an incredible example of how we can go straight to the source and get the understanding, and then it's just a process of applying it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the longer journey typically.
Yeah, and it just the fact that she is so confident the entire time that anyone can do this, that it wasn't anything special, and that we all have this capability of hearing this voice and being given everything that we need. You know, I think that's lost on a lot of people. A lot of people think it was something special for Helen. Really not.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
There was nothing she asked for, nothing she wanted, nothing she was proud of or happy about.
Well, and I think she had a tremendous depth of respect and appreciation for the course,
Yeah,
but she just, thoroughly admitted that she resisted applying what it said. I mean, she knew that it was her task in that lifetime to bring the course through her, bring it forth, from her mind, and with an unimaginable clarity for most of us anyway. And yet, sometimes we sometimes we fight applying it, and her story, as we've read and continue to read, epitomizes that resistance that we all
this,
have,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
how we can learn to forgive ourselves for that resistance.
yeah. It's just wow, what a great gift this is.
Mhm.
So so do you want me to read?
Sure.
Okay, so um I'm just going to start reading here because
Yeah.
um
Just for context, you might want to, for the recording, just say, we're reading, as usual, Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And on the print version that I have in front of me, of which there were several, we're at the top of page 384 in the chapter 13. And actually, we've
Mhm.
only got a couple pages left in this chapter.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And about 75% through on my Kindle. So,
Uh-huh. Yep.
uh, and of course that could be but the percentage is the best because the page numbers really don't mean anything because you can
Right.
make the font bigger or smaller and
Yep.
changes everything. So 75% through. So yeah, we'll make it. All right. So, so Ken says, in summary, then, the scribing of A Course in Miracles can be seen as having brought to the surface Helen's basic conflict. As with her dream of the blue-gray bird, who was not even sure he was the bird, Helen, on a conscious level, could never totally identify with who she really was, always vacillating between being a child of God or a child of the ego. And personally, I don't know anybody who does that. So, uh,
Wow, it's interesting. That your version has a different a different words. I had to look up and say, Are we reading the same thing?" So there must have been some editing done between the time that your digital version was made and this one. This is the first time I've noticed a discrepancy between this print version and
what is the
which.
difference?
Well, why don't you finish the paragraph and then I'll read mine and see.
Okay,
We can see
okay,
how's that. Okay,
all right.
probably not.
Okay.
Probably just a minor grammatical changes. I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Helen, on a conscious level, could never totally identify with who she really was, always vacillating between being a child of God or a child of the ego. Her very strong ego identification and struggles to appear normal to the world were very powerful defenses against accepting her true spiritual self. However, once the course began, this repressed conflict between her two selves was uncovered, as obviously Jesus could only have spoken through Helen's spiritual side.
Mhm.
Helen was thus forced to deal with this problem, and her different and contradictory ways of coping were characteristic of her ego's very inefficient and ineffective problem-solving enterprises. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and everyone's ego is inefficient and ineffective, right, in terms of solving problems,
Oh
because
my
the
gosh.
ego is, in fact, the ego isn't even the problem. It's our choice for the ego that's the problem. I also have to keep correcting myself because if we thought the ego was real, then we really would have a problem. But the whole uh, premise and foundation of the quantum forgiveness or the non-dual forgiveness, if you will, that the course is rests upon, and its only true foundation is that nothing happened, and which means that everyone's ego is just a massive dream, and our minds are really powerful, and we can dream some pretty bizarre things. We can dream that we're separate from each other. We can dream that we're separate from our creator, and we can make up a whole space-time universe that seems to support that wherever we look when we're
Yeah. We
looking through the ego's blindness of material sight. Huh?
Exactly. We can make up a universe filled with people. Um, and and I know that we've done it because when you're dreaming, when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, there are no other people, but they're all there. Then your dream is filled with people.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this is. It's a dream that's filled with what seems to be others, but doesn't really it isn't really happening. Anyway, I'm so interested in what is the difference or what's the
Oh,
difference.
I think it's just one sentence, as it turns out, at least, having tracked what you read with what's in ink on paper here in front of me. Um, let's see, I guess it's the second sentence that begins with, "As with her dream of the blue-gray bird, who was not even sure he was a bird." And here's where I think it departs, but same basic content, just different form, probably just a little better worded. Helen, on a conscious level, could never successfully identify with who she really was, again, a child of God or a child of the ego. Her very strong ego identification and struggles to appear normal to the world were very powerful defenses against accepting her true spiritual self. I think that's where, yeah.
Yeah. So just a little
Just a minor change, but I just thought, wait a minute, am I? I thought maybe because I know sometimes I'll read something and realize, oh, put in a different word,
put in a
and so
different word around the word.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and I certainly have heard other people do that in course study groups, and sometimes they're Freudian slips, and and other times I think it's an optical issue. People needing new
Oh,
prescriptions.
weird.
I've certainly been there. Yeah,
I noticed that too. And
yeah,
I do it myself.
sure, sure.
So it just, yeah. And I think they're seeing something different than I'm seeing. Well, but
Well, and,
anyway,
and that's the first law of chaos, that the truth is different for everyone, right?
that's right.
And we made up a world so that no matter who, even if you're identical twins in the same room, just looking at the same thing, um, you're probably going to notice different things and have a different experience just because we made the world up so that differences were not only uh, obvious but emphasized, and anything that was the same is basically suppressed pretty
Yeah.
much.
Sure. So it's
Although interestingly, there's a certain element of sameness even on this level that we tend to associate with beauty, like patterns and repetitions and, you know, things that are the same on different scales that we call fractals. And it's kind of interesting that, the sameness really does have a way of kind of getting through, even though the ego doesn't want to, it'll accept a little sameness, but only in order to identify with a we and a they in some fashion, typically, right?
which is the two selves that is being really spoken of here, even
Yeah,
though
yeah.
it may seem like they're like two separate beings, but it really is just an argument between me and myself
Hmm.
the whole time. And so that's uh, to come to recognize that, and to recognize really just this week, really, um, I don't know, really big time. I guess I kind of recognize that uh, because all of these characters that are in the dream are made to my specification. Um, and I'm complaining about how they are, of course, that just shows, how conflicted my mind is.
Hmm.
But to even recognize that, yes, they are made to my specifications.
Right.
I want a bad guy that I can hate for this reason. I want to see somebody being treated unfairly. I want to, experience sickness and suffering.
Hmm.
All of these things, you think, well, no, I don't want that. But in reality, I must want it, or I wouldn't be experiencing it.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying I don't, let's look at the reason that I do. And this is what I think, Jesus is really helping Helen to see the reasons why she did want to be in conflict. Just as he's showing us through the Course of Miracles,
Hmm.
here's the reason you want the conflict.
Right.
It's not for any reason other than you want to prove that you're right.
And the right being, I get to keep a separate self that's a defiance against perfect oneness, because like Oliver, we want more than everything,
Yeah.
somehow deluding ourselves that everything isn't enough. So we want to make sure there's plenty of scapegoats in our goatscape, right?
Goatscape. uh,
Just
I-
and if the inventory starts running low, we split the battle lines, draw the battle lines a different way, and make a different we they, so that there's enough scapegoats in our every moment to throw the blame at, right?
yeah. And it'll always be there as long as we think we're here. And as long as we think that there is something to be gained by it.
Hmm.
And that's why we have to look at what is it that I want. And just like you said, it's just to prove that, I exist. I'm I am a separate entity. Um, That song, all my problems based on uh, the something that I'm a independent entity. Anyway, it's a song. Uh,
Really?
yeah,
I've never heard that song.
I'll have to find it and play it for you.
Okay.
Okay,
Shall I
all
go
right.
on?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
You go on.
Um,
I'm gonna find that song.
oh, okay. Um, Ken continues, there was, moreover, Helen's ego that accepted no responsibility for her situation, which she bitterly perceived to be one of misery and imposition, if not outright persecution. In this state, she felt only resentful and sacrificial, the exact opposite of the few moments of joy and gratitude the scribing of A Course in Miracles gave to her. As Bill later said of Helen's split mind, quote, the same process of dissociation that enabled Helen to take down the course also made it virtually impossible for her to learn it, unquote. Wow, that's a pretty potent quote, isn't it?
That is pretty potent. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
really.
Well, I think, the course aims at healing the dissociation, obviously. And yet it's the right use of dissociation or the right use of denial would be to deny the ego's interpretation or really misinterpretation of everything, which is what Helen would have had to have done in order to let the content of the course come through. But in terms of applying it, she was using her dissociation with what it said in a different way, even though she allowed it to come through with incredible clarity. Right?
Yeah, which is it just goes to show the strength of Helen's mind
Mm-hmm.
that she could juggle that. Um, seriously, that's shows you a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
Our minds are really powerful, huh? We can
Yeah, our
imagine a
minds are
world that's
very powerful.
divided and not even question its validity, huh?
Yep. All
Better
right.
than most.
I'm
I should finish that paragraph, huh?
yeah, go ahead and finish that paragraph, and
Sure.
then I'll play that song.
Oh, okay. So Ken concludes the paragraph with such conflict becomes intolerable, and it led to Helen's continued attempts not to deal with the anguish of its lack of resolution. So, I think we can all relate to that. This when we're pushing love away, with a capital L, um, we're not peaceful. And that's pretty much it, isn't it?
That I mean, that's today's lesson.
Yeah, and well, yeah, it's every day's
Every
lesson.
day's lesson. That's true.
But yeah, when we push the peace of God away, we know what we're doing. I mean, there's a recognition that that's what we're doing, and I think the point is to not beat up on ourselves. Yeah, the other day I was thinking about the phrase adding insult to injury, and I was thinking the injury that we imagined we've inflicted on ourselves is the injury, in the same way that if you cut yourself, you're using something sharp to divide one thing from another. Well, that's
Mhm.
that's the injury of the belief in separation, which of course never happened. But the insult that we add is when ego uh, interprets that self-inflicted non-injury as having been accomplished. It basically uses that to reinforce its abysmal self-concept, and it adds insult by it's almost like you fall down, and the ego says, "Okay, now while you're down, I'm going to put my foot on your head and dunk it further into the mud puddle you fell into." You know, and but that's the insult being added to the injury, right?
Exactly.
So the insult is really uh, the the self demeaning self concept that is the only one that ego can have, and we can describe it a lot of different ways, but it's the guilt,
In itself,
the horrible concept that we think we're the home of evil, darkness, and sin, as lesson 93 says, even though
it
our real identity is that light and peace and joy abide in us. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And all those what would you call it? Those sayings that come out of uh thinking that way are they're true. I mean, people say, "Oh, don't give me the platitudes." But they're not platitudes. It's the truth. You know. Anyway, I'm going to play this song for
Okay,
you,
sure.
and this is by a guy named Bill East. And let's see if how it comes across.
What's the title? Oh, sorry.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity that has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity that has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity that has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity that has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity? Are all my problems based on the assumption that there's a separate independent entity that has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? That has power of its own, that can stand on its own, that has an independent nature of its own? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Is there a separate independent entity, or is everything happening spontaneously? Is there a separate person in here that everything is now happening to? Is there anyone inside here? Is there anyone inside there? Is there a separate person in here that everything is now happening to? Is there anyone inside here? Is there anyone inside there? Is awareness happening now? Are sensations appearing now? Are there assumptions about what is here now? Is my true nature this awareness now? Is awareness happening now? Are sensations appearing now? Are there assumptions about what is here now? Is my true nature this awareness now? Is there a separate person in here that everything is now happening to? Is there anyone inside here? Is there anyone inside there? Is there a separate person in here that everything is now happening to? Is there anyone inside here? Is there anyone inside there? Is awareness happening now? Are sensations appearing now? Are there assumptions about what is here now? Is my true nature this awareness now? Is awareness happening now? Are sensations appearing now? Are there assumptions about what is here now? Is my true nature this awareness now?
And there we are.
Okie dokie. That's a fun song. Thanks.
It's a fun song, and I love I mean, I love the question.
Yeah.
I love, and for me, I've listened to this over and over many, many times, because it actually puts me in the question, and recognizing that the awareness is really what I am right now. And I mean, that's pretty profound. Anyway,
Mhm, mhm.
uh,
Yeah, it's probably high up on the pure non-dual top 40 uh, charts, right?
the guy has 5 subscribers. I'm one of them. So,
Okay, well let's make it an even half dozen. Here we go. There we go. Ta-da. All
oh,
right.
geez.
Yeah.
All right. So you want me to read?
Sure. Why not? Let's
Okay.
go. Let's.
Okay. In the spring of 1968, while the course was still coming through Helen, Bill took her to see Eileen Garrett, America's then leading psychic. Helen and Bill entered the room where she was to be speaking, and as soon as they walked in, Garrett noticed them, immediately impressed by Helen. She called them over to her and, without anything being said about the course, told Helen that she knew that she, Helen, had written something very important, and that because of the light she saw around or within her, her foundation would publish the book, if Helen and Bill so chose. Such plans eventually fell through, however. That Garrett was going to publish it. Garrett then said these very prophetic words to Helen: "If you go with what you have written down, you will be the happiest person on the face of the earth. But if you fight it, you will be sick and unhappy the rest of your life."
Mhm.
Wow, that's like a curse. Um,
Well, I mean, it's everyone's blessing and curse. Then we're choosing between the two every moment.
yeah, yeah,
It's not like we're stuck with the curse if we once we realize that we've cursed ourselves. It's just, oh, well, gee, the secret of salvation that I'm doing this to myself.
doing it
Well,
to
that
myself.
means I could change it then. Someone else isn't doing it to me. I'm doing it to myself. So that's my way out of hell.
Yeah, that's
And that's
it.
the Holy Spirit's consistent doctrine is that our sole responsibility is to accept the atonement for ourselves, and that nothing
Yeah.
happened.
And even the psychic knows it's a choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. It is interesting that people have used Helen's personal life and struggles with the course as witnesses for and against its authenticity. Believe me, I still hear that stuff. I know you
Yeah,
do too.
yeah.
Uh, the positive view was that Helen's ego was so dominant that in no way could she herself have written A Course in Miracles, and so someone else must have. On the
Mhm.
other side, often coming from a more traditional Christian view, others would argue that if Helen's experience of Jesus were indeed valid, her life would surely have changed. The fact that it did not, therefore, invalidated the experiences and pointed up their ego nature.
Sort of mental Calvinism is what
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah,
I think we talked about Calvinism before. It's mentioned in some of Ken's work, Ken Wapnick's other work, where he talks about how there's a religious um, ideology that was called Calvinism that basically presupposed that if you were living a good spiritual life, then your material life would have to track, and then basically then you'd be healthy, wealthy, and everything would just seem in this world would seem to go smoothly for you, even if everyone else was having a hell of a time. Your life would be somehow a Disney Hallmark movie kind of experience.
yeah.
And
Isn't that what happened to Jesus? He had a great time.
yeah, he got a great view of Golgotha. Got an elevated seat, seating. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
But no, yeah, people look at that and think, it's the what I have seen is that people, will be given things or scribe things or write things down, and yeah, if you get to know the person, you're like, how could this person have possibly have, said this or written this or whatever? Because they really didn't. And Helen was a vehicle, even though it came from her own mind. She was so conflicted about who she was, and what really would make her happy. I think she was determined not to be satisfied. And that doesn't mean anything. I mean, for people to, I guess, people could, blame the course or say the course was invalid because of it. But, that would be, to me, the proof is in the pudding.
Mhm.
Um, was it who was telling the story about Yogananda? Oh, maybe it was Ken. Anyway, somebody was telling the story of Yogananda when he came to America and he was wearing his turban and everything, and someone asked him, "Are you a Christian?" And he said, "Why don't you stay with me for a day and then you tell me?"
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, and it really is, if you really have that peace, then it will be evident. And so, that doesn't mean, all the Christians decided they wanted to follow Yogananda, um, because, obviously that didn't happen.
Right. Right.
But the fact is that um, you know, it didn't matter how he was living his life. The teaching you know, was valid and necessary and useful.
Hmm.
So, and don't blame Helen.
Well, yeah, I mean, she definitely was the messenger or the channel. Um, I was thinking how that Ken's comment about how people used Helen's as witnesses, her life and struggles as witnesses for and against the authenticity. What crosses my mind, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, I learned of the passing of a teacher I very much admired, probably my favorite teacher in college, named Charlie Tart. And he was a psychology professor, and he literally wrote the book on altered states of consciousness and coined that term. And I remember taking that class. It was a massive tome, and I don't think he assigned all of that book because it was just so much. There was like 500 or 600 pages, something like that, which would be a lot to cover in a semester, and plus the other books that he assigned. And then I also took a transpersonal psychology class and a Gurdjieff graduate seminar from him, even though didn't. I only just went through my undergraduate program at Davis and didn't go beyond that, other than some uh, community college classes. But anyway, um, Charlie Tart was also, in addition to all the wonderful things he did, and I learned years later that he was studying the course probably about the time that I was in college, but he didn't, in the sacred annals and halls of academia, he probably, didn't bring it up in his classes because it would probably be thought of as religious. But anyway, he did share a lot of things that were very helpful that certainly fed into and supported the course's metaphysics. One of the things that he was very interested in in just parapsychology in general. He had J.B. Ryan, I think, is the experimenter who did all the ESP tests, and the standard test had 5 shapes. I think there was like a circle, a square, a triangle, a star, and
An
a
equal
lot.
sign.
So that's what it was. Okay. Oh, good. Then Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, but he asked all of his students if they were at least bit interested to go through and take the test and just see, what their ability to guess the next symbol that was going to appear. And since there are 5 symbols statistically, averaged out over thousands of trials, you should get 20%, right? Well, he found that most of his students, and I was among them, got above 20%. So, there's so statistically there must have been something to this ESP thing, right? what he said was interesting was that the people who thought it was total BS, who were total skeptics, when they would take the test, they would tend to get statistically below 20%, which they were sort of using, I think the right term might be the contrapositive. They were basically proving that ESP worked by showing that they had the power to influence their ability, or in this case, disability, to guess the correct answer. So they were using their knowledge of what the next symbol was going to be in order to attempt to prove that there's nothing to this ESP thing.
Disable themselves.
Exactly, which I thought was hilarious
That is
because
hilarious.
because it actually, showed that there was something to it by trying to disprove it.
Yeah, yeah,
But
wow.
I think that kind of fits in with what Ken was just saying there. You know, this self-fulfilling prophecy. I believe there's nothing to non-dual metaphysics, says everyone's ego. And so by golly, I'm going to see everything that will show me that Jesus is lying to me in this course, and I can't take the Holy Spirit seriously because it's all bunk, says every ego. And and when we're in that frame of mind, everything seems to support that. And as those great sages, the monkeys said, disappointment will haunt all our dreams, right?
That's right.
But otherwise, when we switch over to the other thought system, carefully hidden by the ego, at the back of its uh, vault, it's the blue dot. There's a little switch in that, and if we flip open the cover of that blue dot, there's a little switch that says ego or Holy Spirit. When we switch it from ego to Holy Spirit, and energize that circuitry in our mind, metaphorically, suddenly everything reflects the sameness. And we realize that kindness actually is our real nature. And that is what makes us happy, is giving up our defenses and our attack thoughts and our grievances.
Yes.
Anyway, but that self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, is just such a helpful idea. And Ken, you know, expresses it here in this paragraph nicely.
Yeah, you asked for it, you got it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
With or without a Toyota, right?
with or without a Toyota. And oh, by the way, trivial, that was the number one song on my 12th birthday. I'm a believer.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you meant the Toyota jingle.
No, not the Toyota thing. It just cracked me up. They have those little quizzes. What was the number one song? Who was
Yeah.
it girl in your, whatever.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
Anyways, it's hilarious.
That
Uh,
is.
okay, so let's see. Um, okay,
Did we finish that paragraph?
no, we did it.
I didn't
So,
think so. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so
Why don't we
I'm just
start it
gonna,
again?
yeah, that's a good idea because uh, this is, yeah, I think this is real important for
It
course.
is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people that, throw Helen under the bus big time
Yeah.
for, not having become a saint in her lifetime. I just find that hilarious.
I took piano lessons, but I'm not a concert pianist yet. I mean,
Oh
and
my
in
God,
fact,
that's
I probably
wonderful.
won't be in this lifetime. But I certainly admire people who have mastered that art.
Yeah, what cracks me up is the people that got the course and didn't even do the workbook and said, "Oh, I'm going to go teach this,"
Yeah.
and went out and started
Oh,
teaching it.
it's funny you should mention yesterday, the evening before I finished one of the first of the two volumes of, um, oh, what's the name of the series? I've got it in front of me here. It's actually, I bought it when they had a big sale at the Foundation for A Course in Miracles. It's The Message of A Course in Miracles, and the volume one is All Are Called, and it's kind of what the course says. And volume two is Few Choose to Listen, which is what the course doesn't say, and so and basically what a lot of course students don't want to pay attention to. But one of the things that I sometimes I'll actually read the appendices first. So I read the introduction, then read the appendices while I was waiting to in the car repair place yesterday. And in the appendices, it's a really excellent section of volume two about how people want to change the course in order to fit their dualistic thinking, and basically are sabotaging their own peace by doing so. Yeah. Anyway, but I thought that's another one we might consider reading at some point.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no, you can't even ask, how can people be doing that? I'm doing it. It's on some level.
Well,
So
we all are. Otherwise, we wouldn't need the course, right?
that's right.
Yeah, yeah,
But fortunately, we're able to see it,
yeah.
and until you can actually look at it, you're never going to lose it. You're just going to blame it on something else. So.
Right, right.
Okay, so I'm going to start reading again here.
Okay.
It is interesting that people have used Helen's personal life and struggles with the Course as witnesses for and against its authenticity. The positive view was that Helen's ego was so dominant that in no way could she have written A Course in Miracles, and so someone else must have, someone with a capital S.
Uh-huh.
On the other side, often coming from a more traditional Christian view, others would argue that if Helen's experiences of Jesus were indeed valid, her life would surely have changed. The fact that it did not, therefore, invalidated the experiences and pointed up their ego nature. Actually, I myself sometimes use that idea with Helen, though without the purpose of discrediting her experience. When Helen would complain that nothing ever happened to her and that Jesus really let her down, I would remind her first of the Course itself,
Hmm.
and then that if people had had one thousands of her experiences of Jesus and the love of God, their lives would have been changed forever. She, of course, could not disagree with me.
Hmm.
It is always instructive, especially in viewing Helen's life, to recall the lines from this text that refer to the Holy Spirit's plan of the atonement or forgiveness. And this is from text chapter 18. Put yourself not in charge of this, for you cannot distinguish between advance and retreat. Some of your greatest advances, as you have judged as failures, and some of your deepest retreats you have evaluated as success. Thus, it would appear as if Helen's personal life were a failure, feeling out of joint in her worldly experience. She nonetheless ended up feeling equally out of joint in her unworldly life as well, at least judging by externals. Moreover, her relationship with Bill, the immediate stimulus for the Course's scribing, was from all external indications unhealed by Jesus' message. It was not the case, however, that Helen's ego triumphed over Jesus in the end, and this fact is the principal burden of the balance of this book. Before developing this theme, however, I shall devote the next two chapters to a discussion of the rest of the material that Helen scribed from Jesus. I then turn to an in-depth discussion of Helen's special and holy relationship with Jesus and her underlying identification with his reality that transcended the ambivalent world of her split mind. And then that's the end as far as I can see, and it just starts with the footnotes then.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Well, you've
reference.
got some footnotes that I don't see. Um,
This is, let's just look where
hmm,
this is.
wonder where that verse
This
is.
was um, tread
No.
lightly on my dreams. They are my dreams.
Okay.
Yet they are my dreams
Dreams, right.
from Yeats. That's been a while ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say that must have been. And what does the footnote say? These lines. Okay, these lines were not remembered exactly by Helen. They are from Yeats' AEDH, wishes for the cloth. I spelled that out. I don't know how you pronounce aid.
Aid, id,
Wishes for the cloths of heaven. And the complete poem is as follows. Had I the heavens embroidered cloth, enwrought with gold and silver light, the blue and the dim of the dark cloths, of night and light and the half light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Okay, so that's ties into that. Yeah, tread softly on my dreams. And I think that ties into something that maybe that was in that section that we read a week or two ago, um, about how if you deprive people of their resistance and their justifications, um, basically that can be a disservice if you insist that they see what they're doing to themselves. I think that what the beauty of the one of the beautiful things about the course, it's also its profundity, is because it comes from a pure non-dual place where there are no demands. The course makes no demands of us, and it represents a thought system that could not possibly be demanding because it is complete oneness and therefore lacks nothing. So there's no need or even thought of demand or coercion or attack or um, jealousy or uh, inadequacy or anything that would imply a lack of any sort or a loss. And so that basically is how the course approaches us, is that you have everything, you are everything. Um, take your own sweet time to realize this, but eventually you'll want to acknowledge that that's the case. And it's very authoritative in its message, but certainly not authoritarian. It's authoritative because it represents the undivided truth, but it's not authoritarian because it demands nothing of us. But yet it states very plainly and clearly what we need to do in order to restore our mind to the truth.
Yeah, and it's my choice.
Exactly. Yeah. It allows us the freedom. And in fact, I think that also ties into early in the text where Jesus said, if I interfered with your thinking, I would be violating the most fundamental law there is, the law of cause and effect.
Yeah.
And the cause and effect is really simplified down to, our one remaining freedom as a prison of this world is to choose against the ego, and automatically the Holy Spirit then becomes our uh, our new thought system, which is our the original one that we thought we abandoned. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the footnotes. If you back up one
Yeah.
page, um, the second footnote says the story of our meeting and the details of the subsequent developments involving the Foundation for Inner Peace and the publication of the course can be found in Robert Scutch's Journey Without Distance, Celestial Arts, Berkeley, California, 1984, and about 1.8 million as of 2005. I think that's probably the number of course books in print. Anyway, you may have seen the announcement that I guess about a dozen days ago, Bob Scutch of the Foundation for Inner Peace passed. He almost made it to 100.
Yeah.
I had the good fortune of meeting Bob along with Judy and Whit and Tam and Bob Rosenthal and a whole bunch of other Deborah and Patricia and a bunch of other Tara, a bunch of other wonderful folks at Foundation for Inner Peace when I worked with them. Gosh, almost a decade ago now, I think. And about a decade ago, for several years on their current website, along with Felix in Munich, Germany. Anyway, Bob was very quiet. Bob Scutch was very quiet, but I always sensed just a genuine peacefulness and friendliness. And when he did speak, it was always something, that was very helpful and relevant. And he also had good sense of humor. He didn't say much, but a lot of times when he said something, it was funny. So I put that on my Facebook page, ACIMblog.com Facebook page, and along with the announcement that came out from the Foundation for Inner Peace the other day about Bob's passing.
No,
But
thank you for that. I
yeah,
saw that he had passed away
yeah,
on I think the first.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah, and maybe that was his commentary about not being fooled by appearances, right?
April Fool. Yeah.
Yeah, so long, but I never was here. Maybe I don't.
Yeah. I wasn't here.
So
So
anyway, Journey Without Distance is one of the first books I read about the course, and it's a good read. And then he has another book of prose that um, I I was given by Judy. Oh gosh, several years ago, and I pick it up now. I keep it in the side pocket on the passenger side of my car, our second car. And occasionally, if I'm stuck somewhere or waiting for something in traffic or something, I'll pull that book out and read an essay or two. They're all like little half page to page and a half kind of little essays, and it's a nice book. And I guess he's written a couple of other novels. And on Gary Renard's Facebook page, it talks about his Gary also posted the FIP announcement and talked about how he was helping Bob Scutch with the book, or at least talking about the two books that he had written more recently. One was maybe they're both metaphysical novels. I haven't read either one, so I can't really speak to them.
Oh, that's cool.
I imagine they're good. Yeah. So anyway, just a tip of the hat to Bob Scutch, and he and Judy basically were without them, the course wouldn't have been published. So he's the last of the original founders of FIP anyway. Even though he doesn't get as much credit as Judy and certainly Helen, Bill, and Ken. He was a stalwart supporter, and I knew that he, up until just recently would maybe it's been a few years, but would make daily runs to the post office with mostly international book orders and things like that, and would answer the phones. And there's several friends who said when they called the foundation years ago, they'd he'd pick up the phone and just dive right at how can I help kind of thing. And so I mean he was more of a background figure, but boy, he sure did a lot for the foundation.
Well, I'm grateful for that and grateful for all of them at the foundation for everything
Yeah.
that they do,
Oh yeah.
both foundations,
Yeah.
because that's how we have still this clear lineage. And I hate to even talk about lineage because, I think a lot of times that's a false, thought that because you knew the person who knew the person who knew the person, somehow or the other, that makes your information more valid. However, I think in the case of the foundation and the case of the publishing and all of that, I think it's really important that there's been this tremendous effort to keep it as pure as possible without any kind of controversy, although certainly a lot of controversy swirled around. But it's still to hear some of the bashing of Ken, especially. It seems like God bless Ken, man.
Oh gosh, yes. And the other day I had a second conversation with Jeff Seibert of the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, and I'll be posting that to acimblog.com this weekend. Still just going through and editing and pulling out some quotes of wonderful things that Jeff shared. It was a short conversation. I basically a year or so let my um, several months ago let my paid Zoom account lapse. So now I just have the 40-minute one, but that's actually plenty because you can actually put a lot into 35, 40 minutes of conversation. And so Jeff stood in front of the chart that he uses on his um, Conversations with Ken Wednesday class series and just walked through Ken's wonderful metaphysical chart and did a fabulous job of giving a high altitude view of what the course's metaphysics are using Ken's chart. So I think people, if they're at least bit interested in the course's metaphysics, will find this a great, very clear distillation. And you can tell that Jeff has been studying with Ken for many years and continues to contribute in honor of Ken, and also with also great clarity and um, dedication to that message. So.
Yeah, thank goodness for and yeah, Jeffy's a wonderful teacher, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it just is wonderful that we carry on. And I love that Tam is keeping things moving as she does, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's just yeah, such a gift that we have them. So and she's still there, Tam.
yeah. Yep. As far as I know,
I mean,
I haven't talked to her in a while, but as far as I should interview her.
yeah,
That's on my to-do list actually. Yeah.
because speaking of the originals, um, she's been there I mean, seriously, I believe that it was inspiration from her that made Judy want to um, get involved in the course or publish the course or something of that nature because of her daughter Tam being so um, gifted.
Well,
And
I think yeah, Tam's psychic and intuitive abilities certainly added to Judy's involvement in the paranormal and the parapsychology, which then of course transitioned to the course and including the name of the foundation, um, which originally reflected the paranormal interest, but then it was changed to Foundation for Inner Peace when the course came along. Yeah, because it seemed only fitting to make it reflect the newly upgraded, if you will, purpose for the foundation. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to remind you I'm not going to be here next week. And
So 2 weeks from today, we'll pick up on chapter 14.
yeah, and we'll start about the Song of Prayer and the clarification
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of this, the actually those are the parts of the course that really affected me the most, I think.
Well,
Uh,
there's some great stuff there. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'm just so grateful. So and there we are, Bruce with Heaven's Robe of Star. That's when you were reading that Yeats poem. It made me think of this picture. So anyway, love you, Bruce.
Likewise. Have a peaceful week, everyone.
All right. And you